Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we will be going over the top lane tier list for patch 7.12. So this patch, there's not too many changes to the top lane. The only champions getting changed are Rumble and Camille. So the list is fairly similar to the one I did a few patches ago, but there are a few new picks that have popped up recently over the past few patches that are doing pretty good against a lot of the meta top lane picks. So that being said guys, let's get started. So starting off in the tier 1 for this patch is going to be Tryndamere. Now this one might seem like a bit of a surprise to a few of you guys, but Tryndamere is actually doing very well right now against pretty much all of the meta top lane picks. I think a few reasons to why Tryndamere is doing a lot better right now is number 1, with the introduction to Rift Herald, it just makes his split push even stronger. If you can get ahead in the early game as Tryndamere, or if you can just get ahead with the champion in general, then he's one of the best champions in the game when ahead, because you can always threaten to dive whenever your ultimate is up. Pretty much no champion can outduel you because of your ultimate if you do get ahead. So if you find yourself getting leads with Tryndamere in the laning phase, you can take the Rift Herald, and if you can end up diving the opponent, then the enemy team is gonna have to send a few members top lane to stop your split push. This patch alone, I've had like 3 or 4 Tryndamere players just solo carry games with their split push because they just get ahead, they get the Rift Herald, and they end up getting the inhibitor tower like 50 minutes into the game. So I think that because he's doing really well against a lot of the meta picks right now, like Fiora, like Galio, he's even doing pretty good against Riven. Tryndamere is definitely pretty underrated, and he's a very strong pick for this patch. And then another reason to why he's gotten stronger recently is because of the item changes. So Infinity Edge got a cost decrease, that's a core item on him. The Zeal item also got a cost decrease. And then items like Guardian Angel and Death's Dance are a lot better on him now. Because you can pick up Guardian Angel pretty early on now with Tryndamere, it just makes him even more annoying to deal with, because first you have to get past his ultimate, and then after that you have to deal with the Guardian Angel. And then if it's late game and he's got a Death's Dance, he's gonna pretty much be unkillable. He's gonna be healing for an insane amount from that Death's Dance, and you're not gonna be able to burst him down because the Death's Dance, it does defer a lot of your damage. So he's not gonna be a champion that you can kill very easily, and he's just a very annoying, very strong split pushing champion for this patch. Now, as for when you should not pick him, as you can see here, try to avoid Teemo. That's more of a cheese pick though, and Teemo isn't played very often, but if the enemy team does lock Teemo, then it's probably best not to pick Tryndamere. But as you can see, like, he's doing really well against most of the tank top laners. He's doing well against Galio, and he's also, you can't see the stats on screen there, but he is doing pretty well against Fiora and Riven as well in this patch. So next up here in the tier 1 is going to be Jarvan. So Jarvan has popped up recently kind of out of nowhere. He's a top laner that barely saw any play, but right now he's actually the most picked top laner in the competitive scene. Now, a few reasons to why Jarvan is very strong right now. The first one being he does very well into pretty much any tank top lane champion. He does have the armor shred with his Q, so whenever he Qs the opponent, it's just going to be a lot easier for him to deal with those tank champions. He also does synergize very well with a lot of the meta picks being played in this patch. Right now, Orianna is the most picked mid laner right now, and the Jarvan Orianna combo is just very, very strong for team fighting. He also can provide great engage for his team and great follow-up with a lot of these meta junglers that are being played. So we're seeing a lot of Zac right now, a lot of Warwick, Kha'Zix, Lee Sin. All of these junglers want to dive in on the back line, and with Jarvan, if you can dive in with them and just make it a lot easier to assassinate that high priority target, then you're gonna have a lot easier of a time just winning mid to late game team fights and bursting down those high priority targets. The item changes to Guardian Angel also help him out a lot because he's another one of these dive champions, and if you've got the Guardian Angel, then you don't have to worry too much about like dying. As long as you can get your engage off and your team can follow up, then you can just go really ham on the back line if you do have that GA. And then overall for solo queue, Jarvan is just a very solid pick. His engage range with his EQ combo followed up with his ultimate is pretty much uncounterable. Like, the enemies can't really play against that in solo queue because it's just such a long range engage, and therefore it just makes it very easy for Jarvan to pick off those squishy targets in team fights and get some really good assassinations off. So for when and when you should not pick Jarvan, don't pick him into Fiora. Your EQ combo is very hard to land with Fiora's W, and you're just gonna get that turned on a lot of the time if you're playing against a good Fiora player. He also does struggle a bit against Tryndamere and Darius, but most of the other picks right now in this patch he's doing great against, so he does very well against pretty much any tank top lane champion, and then he can also do pretty well against these weaker early game top lane champions, like for example Gangplank. And then speaking of Fiora, she still is in the tier 1 for top lane in this patch. Fiora is one of the strongest, like if not the strongest top laner in the patch right now. Fiora's matchups in the top lane are very strong right now. She's one of the best scaling top laners too. If you let this champion get to her 2 to 3 item spike, then there's almost no top laner in the game that can actually deal with her in a 1v1 scenario, especially if you are playing a tank champion. Galio right now is a very highly picked top laner, and Fiora absolutely destroys Galio in the 1v1. She also destroys like most other tank champions once she does get a few items, and I think that if you want to play like a good split pushing top laner in this patch and just try to solo carry by your split push, then Fiora is the champion that you should be looking to play. So I've had Fiora on the tier 1 for the past few patches now, so I'm not going to go too much more into detail as to why she's a very strong pick, but the item changes recently have helped her out quite a bit, and then she also is just a very good pick right now with the new Rift Herald and her ability to just solo carry games with her split push. And then for her matchups in this patch, the only champion I would really try to avoid is Pantheon. He can just destroy you in the early game, and you might not even be able to reach your like 2 to 3 item spike against him if he does shut you down really hard in the early game. Most other matchups though are skill matchups, or she does absolutely destroy them in this patch, so I'd be looking to pick up Fiora for sure in 7.12. And then lastly here, to round out the tier 1s for this patch is going to be Pantheon. So Pantheon right now is one of the best, if not the best early game top laner that you can play, with the early game being very important in this patch as well, and with it being very focused around that Rift Herald, Pantheon's just even stronger, because if you get a lead in the early game and if you can get that Rift Herald, then your snowball potential with Pantheon is insanely good, because once you do get the Rift Herald, you put that in your lane, you grab a free tower, the enemy top laner is going to be so far behind that they're just going to be farming pretty much at their inhibitor tower, and because you're playing Pantheon, you can use your ultimate to roam around the map, influence other lanes, and just get an insane snowball going in the early game. He's also one of the easiest to play top lane champions. His kit is very simple, and therefore when playing the champion you can really focus on other aspects of the game a lot. You can focus on your macro, and you can just focus on other things that aren't skill shots and that aren't like micro plays that you have to focus on when you're playing champions like Riven for example. So it just makes Pantheon like a very good pick for solo queue, and I'd be looking to pick him up in 7.12 if you haven't already. And then for when you should be looking to pick this champion, pick him in most scenarios. There's really not too many scenarios to where I would not pick the champion. Definitely pick him against Fiora, because Fiora is one of the most picked top laners in this patch right now, and he's really the only champion that kind of hard counters Fiora, or that can do very well against her in the laning phase. The only picks I would try to avoid are, I guess, these cheese picks like Heimerdinger and Sion, but I really don't think you have to worry about those ones too much because they're very low pick top laners. I'm pretty sure they only have like a 1 or 2% pick rate in this patch. So now for the tier 2 in this patch here, these are the strong picks. They're still very good picks for solo queue if you can play them well, but if you can play a tier 1 champion and you can also play a tier 2 champion, then I'd be prioritizing the tier 1 champions in this patch. So I want to take a look at Yasuo, Jace, and Kled, because those are the champions that move down from the tier 1 down into the tier 2. So for Yasuo right now, I think he's going to be a little bit weaker, or he is going to be a bit weaker in this patch, because they are nerfing Doran's shield, and in this patch right now, he actually isn't doing very well against a lot of the meta picks. So Darius and Pantheon, for example, pretty much destroy Yasuo in the laning phase. I would not be looking to pick Yasuo blind, because I think he's just got a few too many counters right now in the top lane. But if you can find a favorable matchup and a matchup that he can do well in, then I think he is still a very good top lane pick, which is why he is still in the tier 2. For Jace right now, Jace isn't a champion that you usually can say he's got losing matchups, but he is actually struggling a little bit against like Pantheon, Jarvan, Fiora, and Tryndamere in this patch right now, which is why he's not in the tier 1. Jace does have a very good early game though, and he does do well against most other top lane picks, so he is still a very strong top lane champion, but there are just a few champions that are doing a little bit better than him in this patch and that can actually deal with him in 7.12. And then for Kled right now, he's kind of similar to Jace in the sense that he does well into most things, but he is kind of getting smashed by a few of the top lane champions, especially the tier 1 picks. So Pantheon, Fiora, Tryndamere are doing very well against Kled right now in this patch, and he is having a pretty hard time beating them. Most other picks though, he can go even with, and he can do pretty well against most of the other top laners, so that's why he is still a strong pick, and it's why he is still in the tier 2. So that is going to be all for this tier list for 7.12 for the top lane. If you guys did enjoy the video, then please be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching guys, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.